Well, welcome back, Bob Guccione Jr., a longtime friend and occasional collaborator with Media Post. And for those of you who don't know him, of course you should, but if you don't, he grew up literally in the publishing industry at Penthouse and Omni Magazine, went on to found Spin, and ran many other important publications, including Discover. But Bob has some new news. He just announced that starting this fall, he's going to launch a new online publication called RFLXT, and I'm going to ask him to pronounce the correct
Reflex. Reflex.
reflex.
Yeah, like as
Okay, I
in
just want
reflex.
to
So somebody reflects.
reflect on something. So I wanted to get the sound check, so I got it right. But basically, it's going to be a new publication in the style of Bob Guccione Jr.'s editorial style. Little irreverent, some surprises, I imagine. So I'd like to tee that up and just ask Bob to describe what this publication will be and why you're launching it now.
Well, interestingly, you didn't mention it's a science publication. We're covering science. And there's plenty of good science sites out there. That's not a vast vacuum. But I felt that a couple of things. One is I did feel, without naming names, some of them were a little linear and a bit dull and a bit, strident. And I thought there was room for something more lively, which is what I intend to do with Reflex, and something more probing. I feel that science journalism in the last decade or so has closed shop like a clam. It's closed up like a clam a bit, and it's become very, very protective of science and scientists rather than challenging, skeptical, inquisitive. And I felt that was the absence in the field that we could step into and change. And you've known me a long time, Joe, as you said in your intro, and you know that my main interest in publishing is journalism, and not just good writing, although that's very important, but great reporting and honest and truthful and sometimes even brave reporting. Anybody can report what everybody wants to hear. It takes a certain amount of editorial courage to report what people don't want to hear. And I feel that the science media at the moment is not doing much of what we don't want to hear. And that's a great shame, not least of which to science, which has always maintained that its role is to constantly discover. And in constantly discovering, often finds out that their previous conclusions were wrong. That's the natural evolution of discovery in science. And is missing today, I think, in a lot of the journalism. Not to besmirch all of it, of course, because some of it's utterly fantastic. And we hope to do as well as that. But to me, the absence was a skeptical press, which I think is vital in all cases, not least in science.
Well, I think one of the great things you've brought to all your editorial products is that skepticism, often a contrarian view, another way of looking at reality or perspectives. And of course, you started out in the science business with Omni, which also published science fiction literature, some of the best authors of the time. And then you owned and ran Discover magazine. And in that role, you took on a lot of really counterintuitive stories like debunking the AIDS crisis in a different way, Is that what your goal is with Reflexed?
Well, I think the best of Discover during the time that I was there is certainly part of our goal. And it was to look at things sometimes counterintuitively, sometimes dead on, which people weren't doing as much, and to challenge what we know. And if we challenge and we find out that what we know is true, we say, hey, we challenged it and it's true. As far as we can tell, could be renegotiated tomorrow when something new comes up. But we'll always be honest. We bring no bias to this. It's not a political site that I would bring bias to, but it's a vast, universal, Catholic in the sense of the word universal and open to all things kind of a science site. Now, one of the problems we're facing today, and it's across all media, of course, but it particularly hurts science media, is the tendency to line up with the politically correct notion of something. You cannot challenge vaccines, for instance. Now, 99% of the people will benefit from vaccines. I'm one of them. I got vaccinated. I never got COVID. I've been vaccinated for everything else. I've never got smallpox or anything else that I was vaccinated for. So I am a deep, deep believer in vaccines. We are not living as long as we are because we, ate more apples. I mean, vaccines and medicine have helped us. However, there is a percentage, maybe it's 1%, maybe it's 2% of the population for whom the vaccine has been injurious and in some cases fatal. And to pretend that's not true does a disservice to everything. Because one side will log on to that and say, see, you're not admitting that, therefore we're right, you're wrong. The other side says, well, it's too irrelevant to count, but it's never irrelevant. No human life is irrelevant. So I think the press has to be more open. And as I've said to my own editors in editorial meetings, there are many truths. I don't think there's any instance where there's just one truth. There may be a great preponderance of truth on one side of an issue, as with vaccines, but there are multiple truths. And multiple truths are part of the mystery. And our job is to unravel the mystery. In a nutshell, our job is to deal with the big, big questions of life. Why are we here? What is here? Where do we go? Do we ever get to the edges of this vast universe? Do we ever even understand it? Do we understand it currently? And so on and so forth. Without revealing all the articles we're going to do, one of the pieces I'm going to look into is the Hadron Collider. Because I think when I read what they put out in their press releases, what press coverage they get, it's a lot of inference that great, great things are happening. Well, a lot of money's in that. Trillions of dollars have been invested in this. Or up to $1 trillion, I believe, is the cost of CERN's Hadron Colliders to this date. Well, what are we getting for that? What are we really getting for that? It's a fair question. And I think that's very important. We will ask a lot of what I call fair questions. As I said, not coming from a bias on the left, where I normally would stand, and not coming from a bias on the right, which I normally would resist. No bias whatsoever. Let's find the truth. The tagline for Reflex is science and the pursuit of truth. Not a particularly sexy tagline, but an absolutely accurate one.
I love it. Yeah, so again, it's been consistent with the way you approach all your journalism, which is great. And I do think the science institutions need some reality checking, but it is inherently an industry of professionals who wake up every day trying to disprove themselves through
Exactly.
experimental theory and process, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. But somewhere along the line, and part of it is laziness, part of it is under-resourcedness. Journalist doesn't get paid as much as they should get to really do a long, deep dive in something. And some of it is, frankly, seduction. The journalist is seduced by the glamour of the institutions they're suddenly led into. It doesn't take much for a pharma company to realize, well, this journalist is, salivating at being allowed in. Let's invite them to our conference in Torino or, wherever is exotic and beautiful. And let them speak or be on a panel. Well, of course, the journalist is seduced. So that is an element. There's an element of that. There's also the element, a lot of science journalists like to be thought of as smart as their subjects. So they research the subject, parrot back the subject's own, discoveries, and the subject says, wow, you're so smart. So that becomes a bit of a drug, a bit of a dopamine hit. You don't want to give it up. So these things happen. Now, I fault the publishers, not the journalists, because the publishers would say, wait a minute, whoa, we're being a bit of a cheerleader here. Where are the challenging questions? How do you know these things are true? How do they know these things are true? At least let them explain to you why they think they're true. And that's missing. It's missing, by the way, in a lot of fields, from music to politics, but it's particularly missing in an industry that actually encourages skepticism, and skepticism is the oxygen of science. They're skeptical about their own science.
Well, if you don't mind, I'd love to do more of a deep dive and a discussion on the scientific process and the culture, but we're a business publication, and I'd like to get some insights from you about what the business model is for Reflexed and why it would be relevant to the readers of Media Post, who are
Well,
mainly advertisers and
yeah,
agencies.
of course. Yeah, no, I mean, and a valuable audience, and I'm delighted you've let me introduce Reflex to them. So thank you for that. No, first and foremost, the model is a publishing model. Now, I've been in digital publishing for several years now, and I've learned some of the things that just don't really work. And one of them is programmatic advertising. So we're not going to carry programmatic advertising. We're going to go sell advertising straight to the people who would like to reach this audience. The audience, the demographic of which is going to be characterized as very smart people. That's it. I don't know if they'll be 10 years old or 90 years old. I guess there'll be some of each. Probably in the middle, there'll be an awful lot of middle-aged people very interested in this. But whoever's curious, I think will find Reflex interesting. So that's our demographic. So we will sell ads to people who want to reach that audience, and we'll sell them at a price that is fair to us and fair to them, probably the same or less than they're paying a programmatic agency. We're just therefore not going to carry the kind of ads that turn up and you go, why is this ad here? But also we look to extend into other media areas such as television and to short form video, which is almost, we have your own television output. I won't quite say it's a channel, but it's an output. We'll do podcasts. We'll do audible books. We'll do regular books. All of these things are going to be natural outgrowths. But to begin with, it's going to be a straightforward, advertiser-supported. And then beyond that, we wish to get into things. We know already we want to get into live events, create our own events. We know we want to get into travel, creating travel trips to people who want to go to places that we write about and are of great interest to very curious people, from archaeological sites to, Cape Canaveral. I mean, science sites of great interest around the world. So I don't want to say too much about that plan. I think we'll franchise Reflex. That's our hope, around the world in different languages. But it all comes from, first and foremost, creating a great product. The work is everything. If we don't do a great job, none of this happens. If we do a great job, all of it can happen.
So you have been on a journey, and we've talked to the Media Post audience about this in the past with the launch of Wanderlust, which is a great travel, one of the best travel publications right now.
Thank you very much.
But one of the challenges I think you've also discovered along the way is the difficulty in building an audience and generating awareness and trial and getting the uniques, to use the term. Since an ad-supported media model depends on having an audience reach, how are you going to break through? How are you going to build that desirable audience for advertisers to reach through Reflex?
Well, it's a great question. Of course, it's the essential question and the one that I started out with the very, very beginning, considering. I've learned a lot from Wanderlust, funnily enough, particularly, and Consulting Spin, which is primarily online, although we just started a print edition. So I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
And
By the way,
hey, you got it already. There's the first public announcement of it.
And how long a period is this since it's been in print? How long has it been since it was in print?
Well, it hasn't actually gone out yet. It goes on sale next week. Actually, the 26th. No, good. I'm glad you showed it. I want people to see it. That's fantastic. I like the way it turned out. I'm very happy the way it turned out. Very provocative issue.
Bob, of course, is editor emeritus of Spin and a frequent contributor and content master of it, and writes regularly in there. There's a great piece in here with Bill Maher this issue, so you should get a copy.
It's a great interview. It's a great interview. Well, I've known Bill for 30 plus years, and we have very great open conversations. I think sometimes he forgets he's in an interview. I know I do when I'm interviewing him. And so it was a great interview for the first issue. But getting back to what I've learned from the business is you have to spend money. You have to spend money to reach people. So we intend to do a lot of marketing online and to spread the message as much as we can. I think our appeal is try us out. We're very smart. We're very interesting. We're very irreverent. We're very funny. We're a good time. We're going to be entertaining. We're also going to be doing the best journalism in science. And, to an audience, that's of great interest. It won't equal the audience of Hello Magazine, probably, or Hollywood Reporter or whatever, but that's not what we're trying to do. We're not in that. I don't see this as being massive mass. I think this is a title that will do very well in the 1 to 3 million range. It'll be fantastic because it'll be the right people. Hence our not pursuing programmatic. We just don't want to junk it up, and we don't want to have to be chasing the dragon's tail, to try and keep building. I think we build organically, of course, and I think we build by putting ourselves in front of people. I'm not into anything surreptitious. I'm not into subdomains, like that crap. We're going to be investing in, first and foremost, the site, and secondly, in marketing it to the right audience where we think we can find them. And that'll be all over the map. But we have to
So, go ahead.
no, we have to push it out there. We have to push it out. We can't build it and hope they come. They won't know it's
Well,
there.
you're not starting from complete scratch. You are a joint venture with Reflex, which is an established gaming and entertainment and content platform
Mhm.
already. So will that give you some platform to promote and to acquire a new audience? Or
Yeah, I think it will. I mean, it's not going to be our central marketing. Uh, that's going to skew very young, but I think we'll get the cream of those that audience, those people who will find us interesting. Yes, there'll be cross promotions, of course. And I just think in my life I've never seen a good product not work if it was managed smartly. Um, and I think too many publishers, and especially this is true, I hate to say this, but I feel it's true in the science field. That was my previous exposure to Discover too. Don't realize they're in the entertainment business. You are in fact competing for someone's time, and there are other things they can do with that time, and frankly a lot more, simple and using less brain wattage things to do. So you are competing in a sense for you know being of greater value than the other things they might be thinking of doing in that time. So I think the entertainment factor is important. I think humor, as you know, Joe, everything I've ever done has involved humor, um, because that breaks the ice, and that is the great bringer down of walls between publication and readers. So I'm a great believer in that. And if you can't be funny about something, you're not being smart about it. So, um, and we're not going to be a comedy site, but we're going to be a witty site. So there's going to be irreverence in there, and we're going to have fun with it. And I look forward to, after we launch, coming back and telling you all the things we're doing and that we have planned. I obviously don't want to reveal what we're doing right now, but we're starting out with some very, very strong pieces, some very imaginative pieces, and some very funny pieces. You know, I give you one
well,
little
well, go
one
ahead.
little one little piece we're doing is called the Ministry of Silly Talks. I'm not going to tell you who it's about, but
That's funny.
I'll let you
I'm looking
guess.
forward to that.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah. There's a lot of ripe subject matter out there for that, so that could be fun. You need to
Mhm.
skewer the subject matter a little bit. Um, so just back to the business model for a bit. Um, I'm just wondering, like, would you consider there's a void covering the media industry science, It's something I'm personally passionate about, and I don't think people realize that media, advertising, marketing, communications are art and science, and people don't take it
Mhm.
that seriously since Lewin or Postman as science, but it is. And a lot of the work I'm experiencing with the big agencies for sure is experimentation. So what the leading edge is now is they don't use programmatic per se. What they're using is an experimental model where they try things, they learn from them, they create hypotheses, theses, and they seek to prove them over time. There's a great example we wrote about recently with Interpublic's Kinesso, where they were trying to understand how Google's Performance Max, which is their secret algorithmic sauce, works. And they went through it and they looked at it and they found out in their thesis that it's based on an evolutionary model. It's an algorithm that evolves. It's
Mhm.
crazy. So I think that's ripe subject matter there. I'm not pitching you on it per se. I just think if you want to make this a little relevant to the ad industry, you might want to look at or carve something out about what
I
this
think that's a brilliant
science
idea.
is.
I think
Anyway.
it's a brilliant idea, and I'd like to talk to you more about that. I think that's great. I also think it's a science. I think most things are science. Um, you know, there's vast questions that in our lifetime and probably the lifetime of the species will never know the answers to. And there are smaller questions. Why do we behave this way? Why do we behave that way? We're getting into subjects in the very first month, from racism to uh, the dark web to deep space to superstition and to death. you know, and we're really not just covering the latest in astrophysics or the latest in biology.
Right.
We will cover those things in their most meaningful way. When something very meaningful happens, we'll report on it. But in general, we're probing. We're asking questions. We're probing. You know, when I had Discover, I turned it around and made it profitable. Even I was surprised it was this quick. It was in 90 days. And it went on to be very profitable the 2 years I was there. And it had not been profitable for many years before that. And hasn't, I believe, been particularly profitable since. But somebody said to me a bit disparagingly, all you did was put question marks on the cover. And I said, well, isn't that clever of me?